So Dan and Paul sort of graciously allowed me to sort of start this off with kind of an overview of how I see all these different options, and hopefully it's a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I've never been more glad that I have a hearing disability than with this question, because so basically the idea is, first you want to think about what is the purpose of your course materials, and there's some more information on the selection and evaluation page here, but you know, thinking about, is it something that is where the bulk of the information is going to be through with the textbook? Is it meant to back up or provide supplemental information to what you're lecturing about, that kind of thing? And also expressing and communicating that to your students as well when the class starts. Then of course, search for materials, evaluate them and select them, and then thinking about how you are going to provide access to it. So there are a bunch of different options. I'll speak to the library part first. We can frequently get access to ebooks in such a way that we can get unlimited access so that all your students can access it at the same time. Unfortunately, the pricing really varies on this. For some of the self-reading group books, we've paid like $45 or something for unlimited access. And there was another book recently where it was $1,100 for unlimited access. So it's really right across the board, but we're happy to look into that. We can always put things on reserves. And Erin is our access services librarian, and of course, reserves has been around. It's a library institution, I think, at most libraries. We have inclusive access, which Dan is going to talk about. Obviously, the bookstore is our main way that students, that faculty select their books, yes, ask students to purchase them, lend them, etc. And then what I will talk about a little bit later is open educational resources, which in brief are free, usually free resources that can be modified legally, and of course free is good for students. And then the last step is, you know, assessing how did it work. And so these pages go into more detail about, you know, I did a literature search on reviewing these kinds of things. And of course, I'm not a faculty member, or I am a faculty member, but I am a non-teaching faculty member, or at least I'm not teaching semester-long courses, so I don't pick textbooks. So yeah. So that is basically the overview here. And Dan, do you want to talk about
inclusive access?
Do you want me to go to the webpage?
Please. So. Thank you. Okay. So this is the website for the inclusive access program, sugo.edu/etext. On the front page, it kind of talks about OER and a couple different affordable classroom options before getting into what inclusive access is. So it kind of outlines that and points back to the OER resources that Laura has in the LibGuides.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that later.
Okay. And so with inclusive access, the way that is set up, a faculty member will let Paul know that they would like to be in the program. Usually they can contact him directly or work with their publisher rep to let it be known that they'd like to be in the program. The book selected is then evaluated by the publisher, and we negotiate a price that is lower than retail, something that, since we have near 100% buy-through with these courses, we can get since it's a volume discount, we can get the price lower. So that will give the students a better price on their materials than they would normally get. The charge for that is included in their tuition bill. So that is something that usually, for instance, with the spring semester, students were billed the third week of December. So that they were sent an email that was automatically generated when the charge was put on their bill for the textbook. So roughly about a little over a month prior to the semester starting, the email will be sent to the students. The charge will be put on their bill so that financial aid has a chance to get there and take care of it. So the billing is taken care of, and they have access to the textbook as soon as the Blackboard course opens, which is usually on average about a week before classes start. So students have day one access to their materials. They don't need to worry about going out and searching for that, and they have immediate access. So instructors can immediately get into their materials rather than the typical we get through the syllabus and we have to wait about a week or so until everybody gets their materials so they can start digging into the course materials. So those are the advantages of doing so. Students, if they have another option that they would like to pursue, they do have the ability to opt out. If you could go to the up at the top.
Oh, sure.
The opt-out section right there. So there's instructions here that from Red Shelf. They are the company that handles our billing services. If they wish to opt out, if they'd like to go, this happens for a couple different reasons. Sometimes the students are retaking this course and already have the material, so they don't need it again. There's also sometimes they would like to rent the materials. Sometimes that's a lower price, but usually it's fairly competitive. But they have the ability to opt out prior to the last drop date of the semester, which this year will be February 14th. So it gives students a couple weeks to evaluate and see if they like it. And if that's not something they would like to move on with, they can opt out in the Red Shelf link in their Blackboard course, and the charge will be refunded from their tuition bill. So that, I think, is about it in a nutshell. Just as far as numbers go, this shows the classes that participated in the winter session and the ones that will be participating in the spring. For the fall semester, we had 89 courses, and we calculated the savings at about $160,000 over what they would have paid had they not gone with inclusive access. Over, I believe it was roughly about 3,000 students, and some of those students had multiple courses in the program, so I think it was about 3,500 charges altogether. So, and for spring, we have 129 courses. So it has steadily increased the past couple semesters. And
maybe Dan mentioned like the cost savings vary from course to course. Right?
Definitely.
Some
like
accounting, there's tremendous.
Usually any business course, there's quite a bit of savings. I think economics sees quite a bit of savings. A lot of the large lecture courses, not only are there a decent amount of savings, but since it's usually 100 to 300 students, the savings so.
And then you also have courses like Home to 11 that have many sections.
Right.
So overall.
So I mean, we see savings from over $100 to there's some special education, some of the education courses, like they might normally be $60 and now they're $45 or $50. So it's anywhere from about $10 to over $100. So it does vary across the spectrum, but
So on one of the things, some of the classes that just have small savings, I think of as some of the quizzes are embedded inside of the materials there. So the fact that the students get it on the first day because they're inside this program means that they don't lose any grades. And I know that Liz Schmidt had talked about her class of 300, and about 30 of the students not having bought the materials in the semester before she went this, till into the second month. I think it was October 1st. And those students had lost 4% of their grade by then, which is half a grade come the end of the year. You're either 72 student or you're 68 student. So having the students really, having the materials right in the day one really helped.
Right.
With some in some of those instances.
The courses that have components like MindTap, that have homework and interaction in them, is where the biggest cost savings are.
Yeah.
For Pearson, it's the MindTap or MyLab.
MyLab,
For Cengage, it's MindTap, and for McGraw-Hill, it's Connect.
Yep.
Those are where we see the biggest savings, and are the best candidates for inclusive access if they have those components.
Right. So usually when they have the bundles with the course materials, that's where they get the most savings.
Correct.
So I think anything else?
No, I think those are the big things. And it just goes back to your point. These are pedagogically driven decisions. Yeah. But making good decisions can really help students right up front in how they have access to materials and save them money. Down the road.
Yeah, I mean, you want to use the best materials, but you also want to make sure those materials are something that the students are actually going to be able to get. So,
well, I will add then too. That's a good point. If we looked at some of your stats, like the number of opt-outs has decreased tremendously, particularly when we looked at really having required. They really require this. These materials, and
it's been under 1% for a while. The opt-out rate. So
I remember you giving a talk about this a few semesters back and mentioning that the time that we had the biggest number of opt-outs was when the book was not required.
Right,
so.
And we realized that we should not have the program in those courses. Like it needs to be a requirement.
Yeah, it's too much work to put on students to say just go on opt-out. Don't make them get it if it's not required.
Right.
If it's really optional, then make it optional.
This is not.
Those aren't the materials.
It's not a good fit for this program.
Yeah. And just as a little, I think plug. I think the library reserves is actually like a perfect place for supplemental materials. That way. You don't have to get, several copies. If, we have one or two students in the class who are going to get it, it's right there. So shall I jump into OER next?
Sure.
So I feel like OER and inclusive access are a really good pair because there are not open educational resources for everything. And some of them don't have that homework element in them. And the other thing too that I noticed is that a lot of the publishers that we do inclusive access with, Pearson, don't have a library option for us to get unlimited access, which makes sense because they want to make money. So as I mentioned earlier, OER are typically free, and they can usually be remixed or revised. I'm working with Rosemary Crisali for COM 211, and she reviewed a few different textbooks and is combining, they're all open textbooks, and she's combining elements from each of them because the licensing, the copyright allows her to do that. So obviously, it's free is good. Students really like that. There are a few good places to look for it, to look for OER. I like Oasis. It's actually a tool that was created at Geneseo. And so this searches just for textbooks, but you can search for, let me go to their home here, full courses, simulations, audiobooks, course modules. Really, that's one of the cool things about OER is that it's not just open textbooks. So there's really a lot of options out there. And one of the things I think is neat is MIT has their open courseware project, and I think almost all of their courses now end up on there. And they don't always use open textbooks, in their course, but you can look at their syllabi, and I think that's a really, good option to see what people are using for similar courses. Usually it's pretty straightforward. You just link to it in Blackboard, to your resources. If you use Lumen Learning, that's one of the OER publishers, there is a way to directly connect that into Blackboard, and you can contact Kathy Dutton. SUNY actually has an agreement with Lumen Learning, which, and John Kane is actually doing sessions maybe tomorrow, maybe later this week, on these, and I can't remember the titles right now, but Lumen has a platform called Waymaker, which has, I think it's an adaptive learning or personalized learning built into it. And again, this is free for the students. So it's kind of a value add on top of the textbook. Trying to get to my tab.
It's very similar to the components that the publishers have. It's very interactive with quizzes and homeworks, and the professor can monitor how the person's doing and adjust the course material to how their grading is. It's pretty slick.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe John is using that in his micro econ classes. So these are just some general places to look. I've gone through for a bunch of different subject areas and pointed out a few different places to look. You have things like this where the professional organization or one of the professional organizations actually has reviewed open textbooks and said, this is what we think is good, in addition to the publishers. And then if there are additional types of resources, I was mentioning MIT courseware, there are places to look there. With the sciences, this is one of the big sites. They have a lot of different simulations. And then there are various sites like Merlot, which has been around since at least I think the 2000s, maybe the 1990s, before OER were OER. And that also has different types of resources. So I don't know if I have anything else to add.
Well, maybe we want to just talk a minute, because when we look at all the options, people have the option of free materials and OER materials, which are different, but it can be very difficult for people to understand the difference. And even I don't really necessarily know the difference. I'd have to go back and ask Kristen, is this free or is this OER?
Yeah, and that's a very good
But both
point.
are important, and we don't want to get lost in OER is better than free, or free is better than OER.
Right. I mean,
just
free,
different.
I think free is across the board. No cost is awesome. But yeah, I would think some of the library stuff is free. It's free to students. It's obviously not free for the library because, I was just telling you sometimes it's between like $50 or $1,100. So we are paying for those resources, but there is no cost to the students. And, this would also include a lot of stuff that's out there on the web. Maybe in a journalism class, you're having students read, stuff on CNN and BBC and stuff. And yeah, that stuff is free. It's not OER, but it, free. Like I said, free is good, whether it's OER or not. The main thing that makes OER is that it is licensed with a Creative Commons license. And I think most of you are familiar with this, but if not, basically Creative Commons was built kind of on top of copyright to give people more options about what they can do with their work. So people can go to licenses here. So you can, some people are like, do whatever you want with my work as long as you give me credit for the work that I did. The share alike is basically, you can do whatever you want with this, but then whatever you create, you have to let people do whatever they want with your creation. Sort of keeping that creative line going. There is one where cannot create remixes or adaptations. All of them have this attribution element, as you can see. Non-commercial is pretty self-explanatory. So there aren't a lot of licenses, and they're really built in a way that like the average person can understand them, which is a nice benefit. The other option for OER is that things may be in the public domain, which means that you don't have to give attributions. In academia, of course, we want people to practice, good citation. So, I always say, please do cite public domain stuff anyway, but technically you don't have to. So.
That's really good. And I'll just say maybe at the end here, we're going to talk about the new way that we collect resources, really bookstore orders. But we are interested in knowing if people are doing OER, then they don't necessarily have an order for the bookstore. But we'd like to know that they're going and using that, because we have an obligation to go to report that back to SUNY, which I don't think is always necessarily a driver for people to do it. But just so that we know that you're all set is another reason. But we'll get to that more at the end, I think.
So I'm done, and I think these are your slides, right?
Yeah.
I can be your
Thank you.
Vanna White here.
We're doing a session on next Thursday on the Timber Adopt, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I prepared more for just options that are available at the bookstore.
Yeah.
For this one, and then Thursday. So what College Bookstore really wants to do is provide students and professors with the best course material that is the best fit for them. And there's a process that has to take place in order for that to happen. Next, thank you. And the reason why we do this is because we want to improve student success. There's plenty of studies that show that students that show up the first day of class and have materials will do better in the class. And it's very important that we provide a value for the textbook dollar. We don't want at the end of the semester a student to come in and say, I spent $150 on this book and the teacher didn't even open it up. But that's a bad mix, that I didn't do my job communicating with the professor what he really needed. And we want to have more successes when people come in and say, oh, the inclusive access was so great. I was there, it was tuition, I didn't have to worry about it. I did great in the class. We want successes. Next. So the important part to this is getting timely adoption information. What I do is I take every single adoption and see what are all my options and what are the options that I can propose to the faculty member, so that they may pick a hardcover, but I may find an ebook that works better. Or they may be in the 12th edition and the 13th editions, because it's new, I can get a newer copy that's cheaper than the older one. So I take a lot of time in doing that, and timely adoptions is really important. Meeting that deadline when the course adoptions are needed is the beginning of providing the services for the instructor and the students.
And what I had gathered from the meeting we had in December is that it can be very helpful not only for the upcoming semester, but also for the previous semester. Because if you know that you're going to use the same textbook, then there's some buyback issues and stuff but there's a deadline for that,
We
right?
got a slide for that later.
All right.
Thank you for bringing it up, though. It's very important. It's important because we want to reduce expenses to the student, and the best way to do that is to search out the options. For example, in the buyback, if we know the student or the professor is going to use that book the next semester, we'll buy it back for half of what the cost is. So this reduces textbook expenses. It's also sustainable. We don't have to order the book and have somebody deliver the book and put it on the shelf, and it's a simpler process if the book is being used again. Another important factor is used books are getting harder and harder to find. The industry is trying to do away with paper, and it's getting harder and harder to find copies. And sometimes that's the only way I could get a copy of a book that a professor's used for a long time. But if they don't put it in the buyback, I end up selling it to the wholesalers, and then a week later I might get an adoption, or 2 weeks or a month later saying, oh, I'm going to use that book again. It's gone. And if I try to buy it at a wholesaler, I may or may not get it. And that happened with 2 professors this semester that had to pick different textbooks for this spring because I didn't have an adoption and I sold the books back.
And that's got to be frustrating. It's like we have the books and then to have to buy them back.
It's frustrating when a student comes and says, I paid $100 for this, or I paid $50 for this. You won't give me anything? I can't take a chance. What if the professor moves on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people go to different jobs or retire. And it can be a very costly expense to buy 20, 30 books and then not use them. So it's a crapshoot buying those books back.
Yeah.
Next slide, thank you. Publishers are in it for profit, bookstores are not for profit. At least our bookstore is not for profit. And publishers make decisions that are for their stockholders. We make decisions that are best for the college community. And for example, I worked with Dave Sargent. We had a meeting a couple of weeks back, and we were talking about the book he used. And I said, well, do you use it was the Mind Tap, I believe, the component that's with the loose pages. He says, no, I don't use it. So I said, well, why are you buying it then? Why are you putting it in the adoption? So I demonstrated to him that his book with the extra component was $150. You take the Mind Tap out, it's $100. And I said, well, why don't you use the ebook instead of loose pages? And we dropped it down to $50. So we saved his class $100 per person just by evaluating what he was using and what he was not using.
Mm-hmm.
That really should be a rep's job to find out what is my customer using, because the rep is the faculty is the customer. So I'm sorry, the sales rep customer is the faculty member.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my customer is the faculty and the students. So I try to maneuver in the best interest of everybody. Sometimes sales reps, I don't believe they do that.
Yeah.
Next slide. All right. This is the part where everything's got to come together. And this is where all this communication takes place. Every semester I get, there's new additions. So someone's asked for the 11th, it's gone to the 12th. I just can't go and order the 12th. I have to send an email out to the professor, and I sit and wait and wait and wait. Sometimes losing out on the ability to buy books. Out-of-print items is becoming more and more common. And
a couple people in Tech Ed have that issue.
Yep. And with the VTP course this year, I worked with the professor who hunted down the co-authors of this one book. And after weeks and weeks of emails and phone calls, we finally got permission to make copies of the book with no royalty fees. So now we're going to be making a copy of a book and just charging for materials and labor. So that's an example of how we work behind the scenes to try to get what the professor wants, regardless if it's in print or not in print.
Mm-hmm. Just something to add that I discovered when Tech Ed approached me about this is that sometimes, if it's not making money for the publisher anymore, they tend to not care as much. And if you, what I did is I reached out again to the co-authors. They can sometimes negotiate something called rights reversion, where they get their copyrights back. And what I had suggested to one of these people who actually did respond to me was, have you thought about asking for rights reversion and then releasing it, as an open educational resource. And they were like, that's an idea. So, either way, I kind of like the OER idea because then they can modify it and update it as it goes along. But either way, it's probably easier to at least get permission to copy it.
That's exactly what happened with this book. Is the publisher still owns the rights to it. And because it's a slow, low-volume book, they don't want to put it back in another edition of print. So they just sit on it until the date comes up, and then they give it back to the author. Mm-hmm. So things like that do happen behind the scenes. Another communicating that goes back and forth with the faculty members is what's the best format? What do you want to use? What are the cost difference? Can it be sold in buyback? How long is the shelf life on the ebook? So all those things, there's a tremendous amount of emails that go back and forth with, which I think helps create a good working connection with the faculty, which I'm trying to establish. I've only been in the bookstore. I'm going on my 5th semester now. So it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. I'm learning a lot all the time. Next. So these are the different things that are available in the bookstore, the typical hard copy, paperback, and loose pages. And those hard copies are becoming harder and harder to get. More and more publishers are saying they're rent only, or they're only available in ebooks. So that's one option. The other options are the e-text and the access codes. And there's a combination that can take place between loose pages and access codes, or ebooks that have Connect to it and MindTap and these other components. So there's a lot of options that are out there, and some professors have requirements. I adopted an ebook for a French class thinking, wow, that's a big savings. The teacher doesn't like to have laptops in the classroom because students don't pay attention, so she doesn't allow it. So here's an example where not everything fits according to cost. E-texts are becoming the lowest cost options for books right now. And I spent a lot of time trying to research to see if I can get that either new edition out of e-text would be cheaper, or what components go with it. The downside is their durations, 120 days, 180 days. So they are cheap, but they disappear, most of them. Some are lifetime, but those are usually the English books that are very inexpensive.
So let me ask, do students have a choice in terms of going with an e-text or buying the book, or? Correct.
I always try to list a physical copy for someone because there are learners that just want something in front of them. So I would say 99% of the classes, there's a hard copy and an ebook, or a hard copy and an access code. Loose pages and an access code.
And one thing I think is important for faculty to consider too is it a seminal work in your discipline? Let's say it's like one of the main courses that all students have to take in your major, and they really should have a copy of this, as a reference. I think that makes a difference too, in what options are provided.
Yeah, there are a lot of teaching classes, special ed classes, where you want to keep that book for reference, at least for 5 years. Another slide.
So I just want to go back to e-text again. So has there been a lot of, is this the first semester we're really up?
Last semester, we didn't get it in the system until
it was very late because of the
first week in August. And we were in the busy of moving. So I didn't have a lot of time to source out a lot of the e-text. This semester, I've had a lot of time. So there's a tremendous amount of e-text. It's going to be a huge savings for students if they select it.
So they have a choice.
They have a choice.
How do students make that choice?
When they order it online, it says they have a choice, and it says select one. Some of them, there could be 3 or 4 options. Select 1 out of 4.
Okay.
There could be an access code because I have some leftover ones. There could be an ebook. There could be loose pages with an ebook. So I had Dan touch base on this before, and it's pretty similar to what he had said. I think that students are liking it from what I'm seeing, and faculty are liking it from the number that have been increasing. And it looks like that's a trend that's going to continue, because I've had people ask me in the fall, oh, geez, I wish I could have done it this semester. Well,
Yeah.
in the fall you can.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of people that are moving away from the program. A lot of people that do start it stick with it because I think they like what it offers. So
There are 2 publishers that are staying away from being actively seeking out inclusive access. Here again, because they're profit driven.
right.
And in talking with Susan, I'm going to be a little more aggressive in suggesting it to courses that I think would be a good fit.
Mhm.
So we'll see what happens in the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's really a movement among the faculty to go and to look at the cost of the textbook and to make people more aware and of the option. And Liz Schmidt is leading the a ad hoc group from faculty assembly to go. And I know that they're doing a report at the department chair meeting next Tuesday. So
Whenever I suggested going to a new edition or using an ebook or going from a hard copy to a loose pages, I've had very little resistance in wanting to go in that direction because of the cost. We do course packs. I don't know if anybody knows what they look like, but we do a lot of these. And what happens is professors come to us with the materials they want. If it's something that has a copyright on it, we work with the publishers to secure the rights and whatever necessary paperwork needs to be done for it. And we've done this several times over the last semesters. It's a great way to use this for handouts, so you can't say, oh, I lost it. It's easy to keep. They're usually very inexpensive. This is for Biology 120. I think we made up 150 of these or something. And, sure. There's homework in it. There's different type of material in it. And then they keep adding through the semester. And what we usually charge for is we charge for labor and materials, and if there's any royalties that have to be put on top of it. So this is an $8 package right there.
And just looking at this, it looks like this is probably largely, I don't know. These people, I'm wondering if they're local authors, like if they are here at Oswego, no?
A lot of them are professors on campus. Some of the authors could be old because it's been handed down over the years. And each semester they change it up a little bit.
I was just thinking, I think lab manuals are like an excellent, thing for course packs. But I'm thinking with articles and chapters, I wonder if course reserves might be another option, especially digital. I don't know.
We have some that are even thinner than that for English class.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some that are actually 2 volumes.
Mm-hmm.
That there's no other book for the class except for 2 course packs.
Mm-hmm.
So together, a student may be paying $18 to $20 for 2 volumes of books for the semester.
Wow.
And we try to buy them back.
Yeah.
If there's no changes in it, and if it's not a workbook, we'll buy it back at the end of the semester.
This needs an updated version. Because this is from the library. I looked at it and I'm like, that's our APA style manual, and it is out of date. And of course, there's a new APA version.
We don't monitor the content.
Yeah.
We just copy it.
Yeah.
We tell us
Do
who
what we're told, yeah.
We'll
I
copy
will
it.
find out who is file 1. Who's our file person? Is it Kate or is it? I will talk to Kate and she can talk to them.
Yeah.
Next, or do you want this one?
Next, I think there's one more maybe. So what we try to create is a win-win for everybody. Having students better prepared, using materials that support what the instructors are teaching. Bookstores, we like to supply valuable materials for the students. And in the end, we want the students to have a rewarding experience on campus. We don't want them to, at the end of the semester, have 4 or 5 books they can't sell back or won't even use. We want them to feel that the dollars they spent going into their courses was worth it at the end of the semester for the grades that they got. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, maybe we want to just talk about the last component. I know you're going to do a full session on it next Thursday, but our move to timber adopt. And I wonder if we go and do the video and show people, so you can go and probably just do bring up do a Google search of timber adopt. And so we're really interested in going and having a new way of collecting the orders, and we're going to introduce a new system.
Well, it's not just collecting orders, but I think collecting information on whatever is used, you know, if it's OER or library resources or
Yes.
any of these options.
It's still loading.
Yeah, this is my one fear. But, well, you know, I'd say go ahead. Let's see.
I'll put it on a zip drive for.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Timber Adopt faculty tutorial. In this segment, we will show you how to locate your courses, confirm and remove adoptions, and approve your sections. Each semester, your bookstore team will send out an email to alert you that it is time to submit your adoptions. That email will contain a link to your school's Timber Adopt site. Once you click the link, you'll see a screen much like this. If your school uses single sign-on, the system will automatically log you in, but you may also need to use a username and password. For today's overview, I'll be Professor Nathan. Once you log in, you can bring a term and department into focus. It's important to choose the correct semester. For instance, I'm going to choose Fall 2019. And then the chemistry department. Many schools have department lists that are dozens or hundreds of options long. So it's important to wait a minute after you start typing for the field to autocomplete with your department. Right below that, you're going to see the adoption due date. It's important to note this, and it's important to get your adoptions in prior to the adoption due date. After that date passes, you'll no longer be able to submit adoptions. Below the adoption due date, you will see a list of courses that you have sections to manage. I've chosen Chem 142, and you can see that 1/3 of the sections in this course have been approved. If you want to approve a section with no required materials, just click the slider up at the top, and you're done. You can also add new adoptions by clicking the New Adoption button. When you start to type, you'll see an autocomplete list of titles that are already in the system. You can also choose the Can't Find an Item, Add a New One button. And this will allow you to submit a brand new item into the system. If you don't know the author, publisher, publication date, or description, that's okay. Go ahead and submit it anyway, and the bookstore team will locate this information for you. You can see that the item is color-coded with a salmon-colored background to denote that it's a brand new item. If you didn't mean to add this item, you can click the little trash can icon on the right, and it will be removed. You can also view past materials from the previous semester and add them from the pop-up that appears. If a new item is available, that will be color-coded with yellow, and you can choose the same book but the newer edition by clicking the checkbox and then clicking the green Add Selected Materials to Section button. Again, when you're ready to approve an adoption, click the slider to the right. One final note, you can add notes to your section. The information that you add here will appear on the bookstore's website and be visible to your students. When you are on the Sections and Adoptions tab logged in as a bookstore manager, there are some options visible to you which are not visible to your faculty members. Those additional features are the focus of this part of the tutorial. You'll notice a couple of icons on each section.
Right, we don't.
Section groups,
Or heads of
then
department,
view section history.
administrative assistants.
Also, there are a couple of small approved by instructor and approved by manager links on the right-hand side. The section groups tool allows you to gang together sections and manage them as if they were one. This is most commonly used for 101 or 102 level classes where you might have 30, 40, 50 sections that all have the same required materials. To access section grouping, click the link and a pop-up appears. You can then choose all of the sections to be placed into the group. Give it a name, something like 001, and create a new group. Then you can click Done. You'll notice every single section in the Like 001 group now has a little tag next to it. And when you add a new adoption to any one of them, it's now added to all of them. Likewise, you can confirm the new adoption, and it becomes confirmed for all of them. Second, up here at the top, we have a view section history. This is effectively an accountability log. You can see the date and time, the username, the action, and what happened.
So that's really good. We're going to be introducing that. What's not necessarily easy for someone watching the video to know, Paul, is if they are using free materials, OER material, that'll be options up there for them to choose? Not exactly.
Because this is tied in with Booklog has made all their adjustments for this version, and on the next version there'll be an OER selection, which would be hopefully in the fall. Nathan at Timber is working on that. There is a spot that you could put prepaid in, but that really doesn't fit OER. It fits more inclusive access.
Can you ask them to put a library resources one too, like available?
So let me, and this will become a meeting of that group, but why don't we finish this, and I guess I'll ask.
So right now,
we create an ISBN number.
We have an ISBN number right now for OER.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because no book is identified that way. So anytime that's entered, it'll come up OER, and the description will be that your instructor will direct you to materials for your course. So this way it's also trackable. So at the end of the semester, I can run a report and we know how many classes did that. I should have touched.
That's the instructions we'll give people.
I should have touched base on that in the adoption process. It's important to know what no texts are being used and if OER is being used, because if someone doesn't tell me it's an OER, I don't adopt it that way. I adopt it as no text. So we lose the accountability of how many people are really using the OER.
How about if they had free materials? Is that the same? Well, is that the same as no text?
I would assume that would be no text required.
Free materials, so it'll be free. So that's an option on the.
No text required, yes.
Okay.
If in Timber Adopt you go to the class and you just click on approve without putting anything in there, it automatically selects no text required.
Now, you also mentioned the dates that were in there.
Right.
Was that a?
I just wrote the date that it's due.
Okay. Right. Probably enough for this session. I mean, we got 2 more minutes. We can ask people to, but actually, it's pretty good. We got quite a few people on Zoom.
Oh.
I'll just let you know.
Hi, everyone on Zoom.
Hello, all our Zoom people out there. So I guess we could ask if people have questions to throw them in the chat, or if you're in the room, you can go ahead and ask them.
Hi, Jessica Harris, Health Promotion and Wellness. I just had a quick question about like the reserve texts. So are we allowed to have multiple textbooks for one class on reserve, or how does that work?
Yes, you can have multiple textbooks. You can have as many as you want, and we can also link to anything that the library owns. So if we have a copy in the library, we can put it on reserve for you. If there is an article or an ebook in our catalog, we can put that in reserve for you.
And we can put multiple copies of the
Yes.
textbook as well, right?
And it can be, it can be professor owned, it can be library owned, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so there's no limit or anything like that. Okay, great.
Thank Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you guys.
That was good. Can we turn it off?
I don't know. I don't want to.
Can. Yeah, just do a
I think if you hit the stop.
Step share.
share will get you under this. But then you should be able to end the meeting. Yeah, come on in.
On the right.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Casey, for not answering this.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I agree, Casey, if you're still there. Right now, I think this is part of what we're hoping to do with Timber Adopt, at least from my end, is we don't have a very robust way of getting data about OER usage.
Okay.